Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, ever since I was a child, I've always known that I wanted to be a lawyer. Lawyers to me then were these characters that I saw on TV who were glamorous, savvy, sweet-talking people, the kind of people I wanted to emulate. People a bit like Matt Myers. However, somewhere inside me was also a passion for justice, but glamour came first. However, there are defining moments in one's life, moments that change the course of one's path through life irrevocably. And I would like to share 3 such moments with you from my life. While I was attending law school at the University of Nairobi, I worked for 3 months with a legal aid clinic in Mombasa, which is a town on the coast of Kenya. And at this clinic, we represented 3 kinds of people. We represented suspects on remand, and these were people who were facing capital offenses. We also represented children who had been defiled, mothers seeking child support from fathers who had deserted their children, and generally indigent people who could not afford legal services. And as I served at that legal aid clinic, I got a chance to visit the prisons of Kenya, places that are dank, dirty, smelly, and I saw the indignity to which Kenyan prisons subject people. People who are suspects, people who are not yet convicted, but people who are treated like the scum of the earth. As I talked and I cried with mothers whose children had been defiled, who are crying out for justice, as I went through police stations trying to urge the police to arrest the defilers, as I looked at how slowly the wheels of justice grind in Kenya, and as I wondered what all of this was about, I realized that law was about more than just glamour, that law is actually a means to bring justice and change to the society around me. However, I still wanted the glamour first. And so I thought, why don't I join a posh law firm, get the corner office, and then maybe after 10 years, along the way I'll offer some pro bono legal aid, and then maybe I'll get into human rights work. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I think God has a way of throwing a spanner into the works. And so one day on my way home from work, I had a road accident. And so I was going home to my house, and someone was learning how to drive, turned around the corner too fast, ran into me, and then into a wall, pinning me underneath. And as the world went black around me, and I thought I was dying, 2 things happened. The first was I screamed to myself, "Oh God, I don't want to die." And all the things that I had dreamed of doing flashed before my eyes. So the first thing was I thought I didn't call my mother today morning to ask how she was. I kept on saying I would call her. And then I thought about the great things that I wanted to do in Kenya, the big and glamorous career I wanted to have, and the kind of change that I wanted to make. And I thought, oh God, I'm not ready to die. So thank God I didn't die. I survived with a broken right arm and a dislocated right knee. And as I lay in hospital for 2 weeks and at home for 6 months, undergoing very painful physiotherapy to regain use of my right hand that was paralyzed and my right leg, I had a chance to reevaluate my life. And I realized 2 things. 1, life is too short, and so if you want to achieve what you want to achieve, you better do it quickly. And so I adopted a motto that Fanta is using to market its product: eat life with a big spoon. And so as people have asked me how someone as young as I am has done some of the things that I've done, it's because of eating life with a big spoon. And so currently I work with the Institute for Legislative Affairs, where we offer technical support to members of parliament in the form of drafting legislation, primarily private members' bills, and lobbying for policies and laws that will change the lives of Kenyans. Unfortunately, a lot of the things that Kenyans need are not politically expedient, and so they are not likely to come up in our parliament. And the Kenyan Tobacco Control Bill was one such thing. We had a strong industry that was lobbying against it, and so it had been in parliament for 10 years without moving. And so we picked it up as the first bill that ILA worked on, and as you can see from my short profile, the rest is history. And so I got into tobacco control primarily from the perspective of drafting and lobbying for legislation. but it quickly became a lifelong passion. Tobacco control, like smoking, you see, is addictive. And so I warn those of you who are seated here, it's a lifelong battle. And so I come from a continent of much potential. We've got a lot of raw materials, we've got a mainly young and energetic populace, and we've got lots of opportunity available for those like me who are willing to eat life with a big spoon. It's also the continent that has given you Obama. However, I also come from a continent whose healthcare systems are groaning under the burden of HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and early infant mortality from diseases like diarrhea. A continent which cannot afford the death, disability, and disease caused by tobacco use and exposure to secondhand smoke. I come from a continent that has strongly supported the FCTC process that votes as a bloc to get the best possible tobacco control measures. However, it's also a continent that has relatively little domestic legislation on the ground, poor capacity to enforce whatever little legislation exists, and high rates of illiteracy. And therefore, it is a continent that the tobacco industry has identified as an emerging market. And 2 days ago, I was at Philip Morris International shareholders meeting, and I watched Louis Camilleri boasting about the profit that he was making from marketing a deadly product to children in the developing world. And so we have been identified by the industry, and we are being targeted by advertising and marketing tactics like billboards, single stick sales, use of misleading descriptors, all of which are tactics that can no longer be used in the US, but which the tobacco industry is using in Africa with devastating and intended consequences. And so as we have carried out the Global Youth Tobacco Survey, every country in Africa is showing rising smoking prevalence among young people. And that's one of the things that drives me, the fact that our children are being hooked to a deadly product, and many of whom smoke their first cigarette as early as 9 years of age. However, I also come from a continent peopled with people like me, tobacco control advocates who will work relentlessly, often without funding and without political will, to get our governments to do the right thing, ratify the FCTC, enact and enforce domestic legislation and policy, and protect our people from the tobacco industry. And so as I stand here today to receive the 2009 Judy Wilkenfeld Award for International Tobacco Control Excellence, I am many things. I am humbled in some small way to be seen as mirroring qualities like respect for diversity, consensus building, and being a role model for others and showing leadership, qualities which Judy Wilkenfeld possessed. I'm honored that the tobacco control community, out of the numerous nominations received from equally outstanding and dedicated advocates, saw me as a fitting recipient of this year's award. But I'm also excited. I'm excited at the opportunity that this award gives me, not for personal edification, but to further the work that myself and many other tobacco control advocates in Africa are doing to prevent the death, disability, and disease that tobacco use is wreaking in Africa. And so I dedicate this award to my family, represented here by my sister Katie, all of whom have stood by me, even when sometimes they have not understood the passions that drive me. I dedicate it to the other tobacco control advocates in Africa, comrades in the fight, and lastly to the God who spared my life that fateful day in 2003. And so friends and colleagues, a luta continua with tobacco control. Thank you.